BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Black Box Ned 88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a couple quick announcements before we start. I would like to say that we've been doing a series on JFK, the assassination and the connections to the Mossad, and the next part of our series will be coming out later this week, most likely on the weekend. This is being recorded on a Thursday, and I hope that will be coming out Saturday to anybody who's following with these live. And if you're listening to this in the future, we have a series on John F. Kennedy and some of the connections to the Israeli Mossad that we've been discussing, so please look out for that one. And earlier this week on the channel, I mentioned how I was hoping to do a lighter upload, and we did one on the subject of human beings living on other planets. We've mentioned that stuff from time to time on the channel. In the past, we did an upload about humans living on the moon and the establishment of lunar bases and such. And in the most recent one, we were talking about humans living on Venus, of all things, and some things that were put forth in the book Human Reality. You know, it's some far out stuff, speculation, futurism, and all that. However, the original topic that I had scheduled for that day was one about what we're going to discuss today, and it was an incident involving the television show Beavis and Butthead, and for this one we have to go back to the year 1993, very specifically October 6th of 1993, but I realized that this one is a case that is not really that light to explore, and there's a very big reason, as we'll see why. I would like to jump over to a website called Mira Hayes. I've never heard of this one before, but Mira Hayes has a piece here. And to give an introduction, one day on October 6, 1993, a 5-year-old kid named Austin Messner lived in a mobile home, and he was watching Beavis and Butthead. The episode was titled Comedians. Later that night, he got up from his bed and walked to the kitchen area of his mobile home. He was searching for his father's cigarette lighter. Then, following the lead of Beavis and Butthead, Messner set his bed on fire and burned the home, killing his 2-year-old sister, Jessica. His mother was shocked when she found that there was a fire in the house, but she survived. She did not blame her son. She blamed television for teaching him that fire is cool and fun. Then 1 week later, MTV announced it would move the cartoon to 10:30 p.m. and delete any references to starting fires from MTV's animated shows. That Sunday, the entire town of Moraine, Ohio, showed up to mourn the loss of little Jessica. And once again, thank you to Mira Hayes. So that's a bit of an introduction. This was something that was very famous that people talked about in the 1990s. However, it was for the first time I heard that a 2-year-old girl, passed away in this incident where somebody was watching Beavis and Butthead, and you heard there the 5-year-old named Austin Messner, and because of the influence of the television show, he started a fire in his family's home, and the mobile home was burned to the ground, and his sister did not survive. I mean, I do insist that we had many conversations about this back in the 90s. I'm 32, so I was just a kid growing up through the 90s. And I had never heard that specific detail that his sister had passed away in that. And first and foremost, yes, absolutely, rest in peace. A moment of memory for little Jessica there. That's absolutely tragic. But what this also just raised the question is, do we find these television shows responsible? I mean, first and foremost, can I just ask the easy challenge question of the day, an introductory one, almost like an icebreaker? Did you watch Beavis and Butthead in the past? And once I got to college, I was quite surprised that a lot of people that I met were only familiar with Beavis and Butthead because of the movie that they had made, Do America. Like Beavis and Butthead, Do America, they never watched the television show, and they weren't even familiar with some of these incidents. And the movie does feature a couple things involving fire, though, but it's not done in a way that would ever encourage anyone. But the real question is, should we find these types of creative projects responsible if they are showing children, as well as anybody, how to go about things? Right now, I would like to say that we've explored the subject on the channel before, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it, because not only did we talk about the death of Elise Paler, where a group of boys were saying that, I mean, they were teenagers, but they were saying that the music of Slayer encourage them to take violent action against a girl and murder her. And we also looked at this very specific question in an upload talking about destructive influences that can come from the music industry. And the title of that upload was Satanic. And that is available here in the description box if you'd like to hear more about exploring that subject a little bit more. The best way you can support this channel is just by listening to some more of our content. At the end of this one, if you'd like to hear another one, it's available in the description box here. But to stay on point with talking about the incident involving Austin Messner and Beavis and Butthead, I would like to jump over to an article from the Baltimore Sun that was written by David Zurawik, Zurawik. And this is the best article that I read about this. They have things from the Associated Press, the LA Times, the New York Times out there. And the Associated Press article was pretty good, but this one here, I thought, was really just the heart and soul of the discussion that I thought we all should be having. So thank you to David for this article that was published October 24th, 1993. Can watching MTV's Beavis and Butthead really lead a 5-year-old boy to set his family's mobile home on fire? Can seeing a film which shows actors as schoolboy athletes testing their mettle, M-E-T-T-L-E, by lying in the middle of a highway as cars whiz past actually lead teenagers to try it for real? First and foremost, about teenagers trying things for real, because there's a difference between the brain of a 5-year-old versus the brain of a 15-year-old. I think we're all in agreement with that. There's a difference with that, however, but are teenagers going to try things that they see in movies? Yes, absolutely. I mean, are teenagers going to try things that they have read about in books or comic books, or they've seen while they're playing video games or even music? Are they going to try and act things out? Yes, absolutely. But the real question is, what is the driving factor? Let's keep going in this article here. The answer to both questions is a resounding yes. Absolutely agreed. According to experts on the effects of media, furthermore, they say it so surely and so clearly that it raises another larger question. Why, as a society, don't we seem to understand the connection or be willing to act on it? Okay, that's the big thing that I think we should be talking about right now. What I would say about this one is, as we talked about with the case of Elise Paylor in the past, if somebody is going to be watching a TV show or watching a movie, as they said, with the teenagers, or they're going to be listening to a song, and they hear about something very destructive, and then they go out and do that in real life, whether it's, we once had a case where some children saw some moves on WWE, like wrestling moves, and then they reenacted the wrestling moves, and one boy died doing that. You know, it's just like they're seeing these violent things on the television or listening to them in music or seeing them in a comic book, and then they recreate that. Is that the fault of the media? And the answer to that is absolutely not. And I guess the way to say it is that somebody must have a pre-existing psychological issue on whether before they are going to be doing something like that. And first and foremost, it would be connected to something such as the inability to differentiate between fantasy and reality. And one of the articles explained this very clearly, involving the case of Beavis and Butthead and this incident talking, Beavis might say things about fire a lot, but there's this school teacher, and I think she's actually like a guest presenter, and she's talking to a class, and she's asking the question, hey, is Beavis a real person? And the students are like, no. And she's like, all right, end of story. Especially with something such as a cartoon, where they're supposed to know that Beavis is not only fictional, not only is he not a real person, but he is also animated. So the thing that is missing there is the inability to differentiate between fantasy and reality. With a 15-year-old, absolutely. With a 10-year-old, absolutely. But what do we make of the situation with a 5-year-old? Let's hear more about this from the Baltimore Sun. In Ohio, 2 weeks ago, this is back in 1993, a 5-year-old boy set fire to his family's mobile home, killing his 2-year-old sister in the blaze. The boy's mother charged that episodes of Beavis and Butthead, in which 2 animated adolescents set fires and said that fire is coal, incited her son. But first and foremost, I think we need to say that the point of Beavis and Butthead is not strictly about fire. I mean, that's not mentioned in every episode. That's not the heart and soul of the show. Last week, 2 incidents in Pennsylvania and New Jersey saw 1 teen critically injured and 1 teen killed after they were hit by vehicles when they were reenacting a scene from the movie The Program. I've never seen that film, actually. Hollywood made more headlines in recent news with responses to the incident. And this goes on to say that MTV removed those clips, but Let's go back to some of these things here, jumping ahead. As debate rages on radio talk shows and in newspaper columns over the incidents and Hollywood's responses to them, there is certainly no shortage of opinions on Beavis and Butthead. But what's missing from the debate are some fundamental facts about TV and its effects, which could help form those opinions. In the case of pre-adolescence, and 5-year-old in that category, that's even an extreme case of pre-adolescence. I mean, one of them anyway. It's important to know that young children can't always tell the difference between TV and reality. Yes, there is a certain expectation with that. There is an expectation. However, children can't always tell the difference between TV and reality. And I say that more as a matter of fact way. That's not the ideal, and that isn't really something that we should expect. The way that media seems to function is if somebody is presenting something as a creative project, it is meant to be received as a creative project, especially with something such as an animated cartoon show, which doesn't even have real people. And there's also something that we can add to this. And I heard this stuff on Free Domain Radio, the stuff that has been taken off YouTube now, but I heard it on there when they're always asking the questions like, would you have done this in front of your parents? Would you have done this in public? Would you have done this in front of other people? And the answer for the 5-year-old Austin Messner, would he have set that fire to his bed if his parents had been watching, if his mother had been watching? I think the answer to that is almost certainly no. So one of the things that is heavily overlooked with these discussions about what a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old can be thinking is they do have this awareness of right and wrong. Now, this sounds crazy, but I used to be a school teacher. I was a school teacher for 6 years. Yeah, I don't really talk about it too much, but during one of our training things, I was talking with a child psychologist who's advising us on these things, and what she told me was that at the age of 3, a child develops an understanding of right and wrong, and this is the way that we should be focusing on this stuff. Like a child has the understanding that they shouldn't be getting out of their seats and running around class. They should have the understanding that they shouldn't be throwing objects. They shouldn't be punching people in the face or slapping other people or doing any unwanted act of aggression toward another person. But what she left out that I learned later on in other training sessions, seminars, whatever you'd like to call them, is that it begins at the age of 3, truly, but the process that she was talking about is just that. It's a process. The brain's understanding of morality is truly solidified at around the mid to late 20s. We're talking ages 25 all the way up to 29. There's a reason why people get insurance reductions at age 25. It's because the brain enters into a different level of maturation, especially the parts of the brain that deal with processing things associated with morality. And we have to go back to that original point. Would he have set the fire if he knew that there was someone present who was observing him? And would he have done that? If his parents were present and watching him? Most likely not. I mean, I can't predict the future or the past, but you would really think that this was something that he was trying to conceal because he did not want to get caught. And that enters into a different world. But they do have something here, though, that is mentioned by a different psychologist. For kids of that age, at least up until the age of 5, television is part of their social reality, says an individual named Dr. Park. It's not quite as credible as information from their parents, but in cases of something like coolness, television has more credibility because one doesn't look to your parents for information on what's cool. He might think that Beavis and Butthead are cool, but I think that that's not really the question of coolness. It's more about that differentiation between fantasy and reality. Now, this is also going to sound a little bit weird, but there was a YouTuber out there named Sierra Pine. I don't think she puts out content anymore, but she talked about some very adult themes, but it really ties into the subject of fantasy, and she made the bold statement: if a person cannot differentiate between fantasy and reality, then they are dangerous. If you cannot differentiate between fantasy and reality, then you are dangerous. And I really began to think about that as well, what exactly is she talking about? How exactly does she mean that? And then I had the realization, like a couple days after that, ever sometimes maybe you sit and you kind of think over, ruminate a little bit, and then you're like, oh, I think I get it now. It doesn't matter what the context is. If somebody cannot differentiate between fantasy and reality, there is something dangerous about them, because in fantasy, there are no consequences. I mean, like, someone can daydream all day about burning down a house, but if they just recognize that that's a fantasy and this is the real world where that type of behavior should not take place, then maybe that's a different issue. And that's the way that Sierra Pine presented it. Like, she would just simply say, if you are able to tell that something is a fantasy and that is not going to be part of your daily life, or you're not going to be doing anything like to bring that to the real world, if you are able to comprehend that differentiation, then it is totally acceptable. If not, then there is something dangerous about you. But so we can really see that's one of the reasons why creative projects cannot be the scapegoat, because people are expected to have this understanding that because something is on the television, it should not be acted out. But the bigger challenge out of all of this is not simply so much what should be happening, but what is happening. Content creators know that people are going to watch this stuff, and then they're going to recreate it. This is a perfect example of exactly how that happens. They also brought up this movie, The Program, which shows some people like lying down in the middle of traffic. So some people reenacted that. They know that this stuff happens, yet they're still putting out content that would influence people in a certain way, knowing fully well that some people are going to watch these episodes or watch that movie, and then they're going to try and recreate it. But are they responsible? No. But simply because, for the same reason, that society has to have an expectation that the human mind can differentiate between fantasy and reality. And going back to the article, MTV says it's so surprised that pre-adolescents are watching when its target audience for Beavis and Butthead, actually, I misspoke, it just says Beavis, was 12 and up, but it shouldn't be surprised at all. The research is there, 30 years of it, suggesting who would watch and why and how. All they had to do was look for it. I mean, that's another thing that we also have to be aware of. You might be able to put these content ratings on there, but children are going to see these things. I mean, that's also something that the media industries have done to protect themselves. I don't know if this stuff existed back in the 1980s. I do remember for the first time I saw TVY7, like, I mean, I guess it's for youths above the age of 7, and of course TVG. I was watching an episode of Power Rangers, and before the episode started, it said, this episode is rated Y7 for youth 7 and up and such. Like, I think that I think that was relatively 90s, but maybe it came out earlier. For example, in discussions in American Studies classes at the University of Maryland about Beavis and Butthead, students who started out defending MTV and blaming the boy's mother ultimately came to agree that virtually any child can get matches and that it's almost impossible for parents to monitor their child's TV viewing 24 hours a day. At the same time, though, I mean, to get matches, that is, something that, first and foremost, let's get to the heart of the issue. It's a moral compass issue. And I don't mean to be hard on the mother. I mean, she did lose her daughter in this. As we said, a two-year-old girl passed away named Jessica. But the other thing to say about it is just that Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, talked about moral compass issues when he was receiving a lot of criticism for similar things. And what he said was, if you do not want your children to act like Bart Simpson, then don't act like Homer Simpson. And I do not really want to say anything specifically about the mother because I didn't know her and I didn't know what was going on with little Austin. But what we can say is that he apparently was not paying attention to the moral expectations that a 5-year-old would have. And I do say that as a 5-year-old. I mean, once again, would he have done those actions in front of his parents? Would he also, do destructive actions of any kind if he knew that there were intense consequences for these actions? And there's many things that go on, so I'm not even convinced about what they say. Some students even came to understand the social class snobbery underlying the same criticism of the boy's mother. They looked down on the woman as the result of one fact they knew about her, which was that she lived in a mobile home. I can't really say anything about that. I mean, I would Absolutely not. I wouldn't look down on her for that at all. I mean, whether you live in a mobile home or you live in a mansion, both of them can burn to the ground, and both of those families could have lost their child. I mean, absolutely not. I mean, I can understand why some people might think that immediately, that other people would do that, but that's not even relevant to the discussion. The type of domicile is irrelevant. Dr. Parks points out that children have always had a special place in discussions of freedom of expression in the First Amendment. Children are seen as an example of an imperfect audience that needs to be protected. Absolutely, they're an imperfect audience that need to be protected, but that's a big point that we're trying to explore throughout this thing. Like, where really is the line? And there is a gray area. I do not expect that everything I say is perfect or that every opinion that someone has on this subject is perfect. There is a genuine gray area. But as somebody once said, it's through navigating our journey through this gray area that we get a greater moral understanding of life. What do you have to say about this? Do you believe that the mother was at fault? Do you believe that Beavis and Butthead was at fault for talking about fire on MTV? And then that watching Beavis do certain actions, and that led Austin to start this fire. Is MTV responsible? Is the mother responsible? Or is this just a unfortunate consequence of life that children are going to see things on TV and eventually they will try something because life is very complicated? What do you have to say? Please drop everything you would like to share in the comment section below. And please visit our link in the description box here talking about satanic influences on the music industry and just some freedom of speech, freedom of expression issues, all of that stuff in there. And please look out for our uploads on JFK and the Mossad coming out soon on this channel. Okay, that's all for me now. Everybody stay safe and have a good weekend that's coming soon, and fairness and empathy. That's how we sign off on the Instagram journal, BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram, and you can hear more of the fairness and empathy show. I can't talk right, but that is available on Instagram, BlackBoxNed88. Until next time.